Welcome to the Quantum Empath. I'm your host, Kelly Michelle, intuitive guide, alchemist, and reality hacker. This is a space where esoteric knowledge, ancient wisdom, personal development, and quantum physics meet to help you shift your frequency, break old patterns, and step into the life your soul came here to live. Let's expand your awareness, upgrade your energy, and create your dream reality, one episode at a time. Let's begin. I had an accidental spiritual awakening, and I had no idea that there was even such a thing when it happened to me, when it started happening to me. And today I want to tell you a little bit about the process of awakening that I've been through and the levels of the game that I've discovered, because there are different levels of the game and there are a lot of traps. So, everybody is talking about the Great Awakening. The Great Awakening. This was something that I was hearing in my conspiracy theory days. Back in 2020, when the world shut down, I had a friend at the time who said, "There's something to this that isn't right, and I would highly recommend getting your news from various sources." And that, to me, was a divine intervention, if you will, because if I had not have known this person, who knows if I would have been guided to listening to alternative information. At the time, I was just taking in mainstream media, and it was quite terrifying. There were death tickers on the screen that I had never seen before, and just the constant fear of how many people were dying and how many people were hospitalized. And so, because I am my open-minded self that I am, I absolutely checked out some alternative information. And I started going down a lot of conspiracy-minded rabbit holes, along with everything related to the pandemic. Was that there was an event 201 that had happened, and this was an exercise that was put on by maybe the World Economic Forum, but I'm not positive on that. Just event 201, which was an exercise. And when I was in the military, we used to do exercises. We used to have play dates with different war scenarios, and we used to have to don our gas masks and gear and get under desks, and there would be this whole thing where I was assigned a certain strategic job, which my job was not strategic. I was in supply, and so I was responsible for a lot of years getting parts shipped out to various repair centers and then tracking them and tracking how much money a day we were losing because this part was missing off the plane. And so that was one of the things I had done while I was in the Air Force. But I digress. I started getting more information from these particular conspiracy-minded podcasts And I, at the time, was, I would say, level 1 of the game. Survival consciousness. I didn't even know that was a thing, but that's what we'll call it. Level 1 survival consciousness. This is when we are just in our victim mentality. I was very much in my victim mentality at this time. I was divorced. I was a single mom. I was cleaning, and we had recently moved into our apartment, that brand new, low income apartment, and I had me and my boys, and I was living pretty high on the hog. I thought, I'm like, ooh, moving on up. And what looked good on the outside was not great on the inside. And by that, I mean, we had this shiny new apartment, but absolutely no insulation. You could hear the upstairs apartment, every single little move they made, every step across the floor. And we stayed there for quite a few years, but I was definitely in this state of fear, and I was washing and wiping down my groceries when I got home. I was wearing masks. I was participating in all of the things that I was told I should do. But through the conspiracy-minded podcasts and media, I started seeing information about the swabs and how they had these little weird wormy things that would move around. And I was hearing whistleblowers who were talking about the ingredients of what was in the vaccines. I was seeing information about people who were getting these really awful blood clots, and they weren't really blood clots. They were just these long, stringy things that morticians were pulling out of people after they died. And they were trying to get the stuff going through the veins, and they couldn't because of these long, stringy things that were running through the veins. And they were coming forward and saying how this was something they had never seen before. And there were multiple morticians saying this same thing. And it makes one question. So then I started, kind of going down some other holes, some rabbit holes around 9/11 and Route 61, Oklahoma City bombings. And I mean, it just goes on and on and on. And I was a prepper. I was worried about the food supplies running out. There was a lot of information in the alternative media that food factories were being set on fire, or trains were derailing and losing shipments. There was a lot of fear being sold through alternative media. I bought fancy water filtration. I bought 25-year shelf life food. I was definitely in the fear of everything going on. But I was on the, I'd say, right side of there's no right or wrong. This is just left, right. I was on the more conservative side of the narrative at the time. And they were being sold a completely different story on the other side, but it was also selling fear. Okay, so level 1. You're living in your victim consciousness. You are working, paying the bills. You're kind of living month to month. You are feeling maybe stuck in a job that you don't love. Maybe you're stuck in a relationship. You feel trapped. And this is a level of the game that many people will play for their entire life. Welcome to level 2, which I like to call the ego consciousness phase. I would like to say I don't think I reached this level of the game, because for many, the ego consciousness phase is when you have climbed the corporate ladder. You have been working, getting the house, getting the car, getting the family. You've done all the things that society said you should do. And I have never felt like I had all of these things. I have never had that moment of thinking, oh, I've arrived. I have everything my little heart desires. But a lot of people who get to this level of the game, they have the financial stability, they have the American dream that we're sold when we're little kids. And they get there and they're like, this sucks. This isn't what I thought it was going to be. I have all this money. I have the house. I have the family, and I'm miserable. Like, I feel empty. You are maybe grinding away. Maybe you're in a business or a job that you don't love, but it makes great money. You are in a relationship with someone that doesn't necessarily make sense to you, but you feel like you are stuck. There are people who reach this level of the game and they will stay here their entire life. And that's okay. That's okay. They will stay in this grind. Grind. Yes, you might have the vacation every now and then, but you're still a slave to the system. So then, if you decide to get on the game board of life, you might wake up to level 3. And I call this the social consciousness, or the us versus them phase. And this phase occurs when either you're playing from level 1 or you're playing from level 2. You don't feel fulfilled in your personal life, and you are starting to realize that there's power in community and in causes. And so you might pick a side, whether that's conservative or liberal. You may decide that I'm going to fight for this cause, and you take on some form of group identity. So you might end up with a certain political dogma or a religious dogma. You might get onto a bandwagon of people who are fighting for a certain social cause. And so during my process, I feel like I went from level 1 to level 3. I bypassed level 2 because I never had all the things. I went straight into level 3, and a lot of people do. And what I ended up doing was finding myself on the conservative side of things, and I was fighting against the story being told about vaccinations. And it actually still makes me a little bit uncomfortable to talk about this, because if I'm being honest, I know a lot of the people that I was listening to at the time who were discussing these things were getting shadow banned or censored. And that raised a lot of questions for me, because I thought, well, why would they be getting censored? It didn't make sense to me at the time that this Operation Warp Speed was happening, and people were so gung-ho to go get this thing, this vaccine. And I was like, what? I had all my vaccines in the military, and I'll tell you what, I didn't like it. And I was in this position of, I'm good. I'm preserved for life. I had all my childhood vaccinations. Then I had all the ones in the military, and I felt good. But then I started noticing that there was a change in the narrative around vaccines, and it started becoming weaponized. And how they sold it was, you are taking the vaccine to protect others. And I thought, oh, hold on. It used to be that you take a vaccine to protect yourself, but now it's being sold as you take it to protect others. And if you are taking it to protect yourself, then you should be covered. And if it works, then it shouldn't matter if somebody takes it or not, because you're protected. But they changed it. And those of you who are neurodivergent and see patterns picked up on this. And there was the little spidey senses of that. Something's not right. And so what we ended up doing was fighting our friends and neighbors. They got us fighting like black ants and red ants in a jar. That they shook us up and got us all pissed off. And then they have us fighting amongst each other. So this was a time when I lost friends. I lost clients. I went into a lot of seclusion. I spent a lot of time by myself. I spent a lot of time doing personal development. And meanwhile, I was out there trying to wake people up. The sky is falling. The sky is falling. But I felt like I was talking to a wall most of the time. And I probably was, because until people are ready to hear it, they're just not ready to hear it. And so this was my entry into the game, the awakening game. Meanwhile, I am doing affirmations, I'm doing personal development work, I'm listening to subliminals, and I'm going through this personal development story of my own, and also being in the fight. And this is where the two levels of the game start to merge. And so when you're waking up to the system and starting to question things, you will be called into another phase of awareness, which is what I call the observer. And I was able to see how the game was being played. I was starting to question how I was buying all this storable food, and I had water, and I was being sold this big fear bomb, but every single time there would be a cue drop or a promise that was being made politically, or I was seeing the way that certain people in charge of, like Fauci, were being elevated into this fame. But on the other hand, there's dirty stuff going on there. And how is that guy even walking around? And everybody, all these people are like, oh, Trump's amazing. And I thought he was the lesser of two evils, if I'm being totally honest. But I quit voting years ago. I don't participate in the political system anymore. And I had friends who thought that that was horrible. You have to speak your voice. You have to participate. Well, no, I don't. Because I watched 2,000 Mules back in, I think it was 2020 or whatever, about all the election rigging. And you know what? There's both Democrats and conservatives who will accuse elections of being rigged. But this is also part of being neurodivergent and seeing the patterns. This is a repeating story, and all it does is flip-flops. And this is the pendulum that they use to keep us controlled. So you start to wake up to cracks in the system. You start to see that Trump is not calling out the dangers of the vaccine, and he's actually the one who was pushing it all. Oh, and then look at that. Pfizer contributed to his campaign. Interesting. And then you start to question, like, everything. I was questioning everything. I was questioning the school system and how that trains our kids to go to work for the system. I started questioning the church because I had a friend who was getting the vaccines and also very sick, and her kids were getting sick, and I was not at the point in my process where that's not my responsibility. Like, I have said what I've said, and I've pissed a lot of people off, and their fate is their fate, and that's their discernment is their discernment. It's not for me to be the person to tell them what to do. And I got to this observer point of, it's not my responsibility. I'm not going to try and convince people of what they should do. And this is a point of neutrality that you reach when you're going through your awakening process, because you start to see the show for what it is. You wake up to the fact that they're all dirty. They're all dirty. It's all dirty. There was a movie I watched early on in my process called Monopoly. And it's about how if you look at all the corporations of the world, they're basically a chain of the top 5. There's 5 or 6 corporations that basically run the world. And they branch off into smaller and smaller entities. But at the top, you have your BlackRock, you have your Vanguard, you have these billionaires who have all these little companies that people are paying into. And so this level 4 starts to feel a little isolating and lonely because you start to see all of it. You see how the alternative news will sell you on gold and water filtration and storable food, and you see how the mainstream media will sell you on your fear, and they will sell you beauty products that promise will make you younger looking or prettier. And either way, they're all trying to sell us something. And this is the phase where a lot of people start going deeper into their healing journey. You might find that your food changes, or that you don't need to drink alcohol as often, or maybe going out to concerts might feel overwhelming because you feel the soup of energy. Do you feel the soup of energy when you go to concerts? I can barely do it anymore. One of my clients actually goes on a regular basis, and I wish she would come back and get some harmonic egg sessions and get that coherence back in her biofield after a few concerts. I can imagine what kind of energy is lurking around her body. But it's level 4 of the game. And a lot of people will think that this is it. This is the great awakening. I'm awakened. And then you might stay there. And this is a level that I would say I was at. And I don't want to say stuck, because timing is divine. Everybody's timing is divine. There's no need to rush ahead. Although I would say that if you are in the us versus them part of the game, and you've been playing that since 2020 or 2021 or 2022, and you're still playing that game, I would highly recommend turning off everything, or switching up your algorithm and looking for stuff that focuses on personal development. Some mainstream personal development people that helped me with my process are people like Rob Dial, Joe Dispenza, Mel Robbins, School of Greatness, and who else? I'm trying to think. I didn't prepare a list. There's a bunch of podcasts that if you just type personal development, these can be very helpful for getting you through the observer stage of the game, because you start to see that your subconscious blocks and your emotional traumas might be deeper than you realized. And so the personal development phase of the journey is pretty important, because once you start your personal development and you realize that childhood, ages 0 to 7, is what shapes the programming that we were given, depending on our culture, depending on our home environment, our parenting situation, whether you had both your parents, you had single parents, if you grew up in poverty or if you grew up in luxury. Everybody's childhood was different, but chances are, if you're on a spiritual awakening journey, you have some sort of childhood trauma or past life trauma or ancestral trauma. A lot of the people that come to me are ancient old souls who are here to wake up the collective consciousness and get us on a path of enlightenment. And then there are also the ones who are the generational curse breakers, who come in and sign up for the really hard childhoods, the sexual abuse, or the lack, scarcity mindsets, or the divorced household. I mean, we sign up for lessons before we come here, and I know this to be true because I've embodied these concepts and understand them at a core level. So this isn't just a topic that I'm talking about that's from a book. This is actual putting these things into action. So you will go through this personal development phase, and this is where you start to find your self-love. You start to realize that the patterns that you make in relationships might look like the same patterns that your parents had. And this was something that happened with my ex-husband and I, is we both came from families that didn't know how to communicate. And so when we would fight, it was silence. We shut down, and it was passive aggressive. We didn't talk about it. And I remember addressing him one time and saying, are we just going to sweep it under the rug, or do you want to talk about it? And he said, let's just sweep it under the rug. And eventually that imploded, because there's only so much that you can sweep under the rug before you have an obvious problem. And so we go through these healing phases of working through all the shadows that society instilled in us, of that we have to work hard, we have to strain and struggle, and there's so many people out there who say, it's the subconscious blocks, you guys. I got really far in my process. I actually had my egg, and I had opened my brick and mortar business, and I was supported. I had a lot of friends coming in and trying it out, and I was meeting new people. And what ended up happening is my former housekeeping client that I had, who was a self-made multimillionaire, came in, and I really thought she was going to come in and make a big purchase and really just save the day. And I thought, oh, I'm so excited to see her. And she sat there and asked me how it was going, and I was kind of telling her, and she said, well, it sounds like you need to get a job. And I think I've talked about this before, but I was, no, I'm not going to get a job. I have a job. This is my job. And so she said, then you need to get out there and share your voice. You need to teach. You need to tell people what you're doing. You need to share information. You need to help people. You need to get back down there in the matrix. And I was like, no. Ooh, scary. But there's a lot of people who said, join the Chamber of Commerce, go to networking events, do that 3D matrix stuff, use hashtags, buy ads. And what I've realized, or come to realize since then, is that I wasn't ever building this business for ego. And if I was building this business from my ego consciousness, and I was doing it to go from my victim consciousness to my ego consciousness, and I was building this business to create the wealth and financial success to be able to maybe get a different car or a different house, then I probably could participate in those more 3D systems. But because I'm so soul-led, my guides told me, this is my soul-led manifestation life. And so I skipped ego consciousness and went straight into my healing journey to learn and grow and really understand these concepts from a deeper level. So I'm studying, as I move into my more personal development stage, I'm studying the law of attraction. I'm doing all the personal development work. I'm understanding that lack and scarcity is just a mindset, and that there is a way to override that information with healing. And so I had made it far enough in my lack and healing journey that I was able to purchase my egg and sign a commercial lease, and that was probably the scariest thing I had ever done. A 3-year commitment, you guys. A 3-year commercial lease. Like, that's freaking scary. I don't even have a lease in my house, which pros and cons, right? I'm month to month, and I guess at any time my landlord could tell me that she's going to sell the house, or that she's going to rent it to somebody else, or she's going to increase my rent, which is something that, that's a possibility. And actually, because I have been living here for 3 years, several months ago, I actually increased my own rent and started paying her $100 more, because in an effort to show God and the universe that I am willing to play the game. I am willing to allow money to just be something that is currency. And so I, out of good faith, started paying her $100 more. And this isn't something that I can really even afford. But my multimillionaire mentor had several rental properties, and she told me one time that she had a tenant who had to move because of a problem that they were having at the house with some plumbing and maybe mold, but I don't remember exactly. And she said she was so grandfathered in, she was so used to paying a certain amount of rent that she couldn't find anywhere else to live on the budget that she had created for herself. And so rather than me being comfortable in a budget that I create for myself, I like to stretch myself. And this is part of the playing the game, part of the personal development work, and part of knowing that all of this is for growth and expansion. And because this particular collective tends to sign up for a lot of growth and expansion in this life, because we have lived multiple lifetimes. If you're listening to this, you've lived multiple lifetimes. There's no doubt. I don't think you could have found me any other way, because there's thousands, hundreds of thousands of podcasts out there. And the frequency that my soul resonates on is one of many, many lifetimes, ancient and cosmic. And it's so interesting. A lot of the people that I run with are, aliens and witches and fairies and unicorns and gnomes, and they're very connected to the earth, but they're also really cosmic. It's so interesting. I don't know if that resonates for you. But once you go through this personal development stage, this healing stage, you're going to find yourself in a position where you're going to be required to make a choice. Do I accept my mission? Or do I keep doing it the way that I've always done it? And whether you stepped out of your victim consciousness or your ego consciousness, you're going to be asked, is this the right thing for me? And you're either going to be asked to step down from your pedestal because you're working from a place of financial success and wealth, and you're being called to become something different. Maybe a healer. Maybe you're being called to work as a teacher or an instructor in some way. And maybe the corporate ladder isn't the thing that you thought it was, and you're going to want to slow down. You're not going to want to do all the travel, or maybe if you do the travel, it's travel that is for your enjoyment and your work. And so I think as we usher in this new era, we're going to go more peer-to-peer, and there's going to be more creators online who are volunteers here for their mission, and you guys are going to do that in a multitude of different ways. Because there are many different types of missions. There's way showers, there's divine light keepers. Divine light keepers, they can pretty much do anything as long as they're happy. They can work at the grocery store, they can be a janitor, they can be a concierge at a hotel. There's so many divine light keepers in this town, service workers that are just out there holding the light. The problem is they're not taking care of their energy, so they're out there pouring from an empty cup into others. And that is the work that I do to help people fill their cup and not be pouring from an empty cup. And so you move into this level of creator. If you decide, you can move into this level of creator. If you go from level 2 to level 5 creator, you are maybe a content creator, and you are getting all the clicks and followers and likes, and you're making all kinds of money, but you're doing it from your ego, which will likely crash. But if you've gone up the different steps and created through healing and created from understanding that there is a greater system at play, and that you want to work outside of the system and you want to be peer-to-peer, that's what a conscious creator looks like. That's this type of work. Nobody pays me to do this podcast. As a matter of fact, it costs me money to do this podcast, and I'm not complaining. I am happy to pay for the services of the software that I use to record this and push it out to the collective through Podbean, which is another service that I pay for to make sure that it goes to Spotify and YouTube and Apple Podcasts and, all the various ones that it goes to. This is my service work. This is how I give back to the collective. And this work is the type of work that helped me in my process of awakening, is because there were people who, like Alex Ferrari on Next Level Soul, I remember when I first started listening to him, and he's like, no, we don't talk about aliens here. But he's since had several guests, and he might even, I don't even know if he would remember that he didn't used to like to talk about that. But I distinctly remember that he told somebody, oh, no, we don't go there on this show. Correct me if I'm wrong, Alex, if you hear this. But when you start to do the healing work, when you start to create from a more conscious place, you understand that we are a little spark of the divine, and that God wants us out there being a warrior for Him. And God is a strange word, right? Or Him. I don't see God as a man. I should just refer to it as source energy or spirit, universe, although I don't use that as much, because to me it's God, source energy. It's all one. And when you've done the healing work, when you've experienced magic happening in your life because of the way that the divine can work with us, I had several miracles appearing in my life over and over again, to the point where I just can't even deny it. I can't deny it. I manifested this house. I manifested my truck. I manifested the 2.5 acres that I'm on, and this wellness center, and my harmonic egg, and a new life for myself and my kids. And so, want to clarify, the level of creatorship is, conscious creatorship is when we start to know who we really are. We are tapped in. We are in communication with our guides. We are working with the divine in service to humanity. We move in love. We're not moving in fear. We're moving in love. We are not moving in lack. We're moving in abundance. We are not living in the stories that we were told as we were growing up, that we are not worthy of wealth. Maybe you were told you would never amount to anything, or that you couldn't do math, or that you just have to be a factory employee because you didn't go to college. I don't believe any of that. The thing that determines your life is your will, your way. And I see the timer is at 50 minutes, so I'm just going to say that there's no right way to get there. And there's no one way to get there. And the fact that I have a harmonic egg is not necessarily my end point. That's not my story. My egg, what I realized once I got it, was the thing that I needed to see and create and attract into my life in order to realize that, oh my God, it's true. I wrote it all down. My wellness center is everything that I had envisioned. My egg, the programs that I'm working with for people, my 6-week empowered empath. I've got remote sessions happening right now, and one of my friends said her and her boyfriend are communicating telepathically. He can pick up on her emotions, and he's not even in the same room with her. Other people are magnetizing in jobs, relationships, houses. It's really fascinating. But I also know it's related to their coherence. And so I knew I had a special gift early on, because when I was still cleaning, I was doing my quantum healing work, and I was getting results. And then I have the egg and I'm getting more results. And I do believe that, and I had a client tell me and this is no shade to any other egg guardians, but she said my egg was different than the other egg in town because it's a different guardian and it's a different energy. It's a little more 3D, if you will. It's a little more focused on stress and performance and nervous system. But my egg, she and I, the way we work is we work through layers. We find all the trapped emotions in your nervous system across all timelines. And then I work by going in and looking for all the trapped emotions in your chakras across all timelines. Then we go through and we look for your ancestral blocks. We look for past life blocks. We look for childhood blocks. And then we call all these parts back to you. In addition, and I don't really talk about this because I'm a little embarrassed because I was shamed for my woo. So the egg works with intention. And what I do is I help people get really clear on intention. But then, in addition to that, if you're working with me one-on-one in my Empowered Empath, I'll go through and I'll tell you what soul contracts you have with 5 different people in your family or in your group of people. I will tell you what types of jobs you had in your past lives. And it's funny, but it will make sense because it always does. I tell people what their cosmic races are. What are your clair gifts? What are your psychic abilities? These are all things that come up in our sessions that I look at week by week, in addition to the custom clearings that we do, the subconscious blocks. I also work with Grabavoy numbers, so if there's anything in your field that needs to be recoded with numeric frequencies, I look at it like corrupted files in your driver. So if you have a driver that's corrupted, we go in and we change those. If you have a driver that is running your money program that is scarcity and lack, and you are trying to invest in a business that you don't financially have the funds for, well, as long as you're operating in your scarcity and lack, you're never going to fully be able to jump into that mission until you understand that that's the trap. Religion is a trap. Scarcity is a trap. Religion will keep you thinking it's all outside of you. Scarcity will tell you you can't do it. Fear of being seen will cause you to not be able to put yourself out there. There's so many coaches out there who can't even speak on video. They just do pictures with nice words. And I think, okay, I mean, it's not a judgment thing. I see what level of the game you're playing. And I see you still have fear of being seen. And if they reached out to me, I would be happy to help. But, people are where they are. And they're not going to invest until they're ready to invest in themselves. And it's not my responsibility to do it for them. All I can do is show up and be there. Tell people what I do. It's not like anything else out there in the world. And I can say that without a shadow of a doubt because, first of all, I am unique in my own right. And then the tools that I use are unique and curated by me. And then my egg, even though there's harmonic eggs all over the world, my egg is different. She is unique. She has her own energetic footprint. The land that she sits on. It's all so fascinating. If you're interested, I do offer 10-minute discovery calls. You can book online at staytunedsoultherapy.com. Book a call. I have a gal that I've been working with who is a mental health professional in New Jersey who we connected through social media, and she is seeing so many cases of what would be considered psychosis. And she said, this energy thing, there's so much to it. And these people don't need medication. They need energy work. But the Matrix is leaving this part out of the story. They're making you think that's all there is. They're making you think that's all there is. But there's more to us. We're energetic beings. We have multiple layers of energetic bodies. We have fascia where things get trapped. We have our chakras. We have our muscles. We have our aura with all this energetic debris from years and years of accumulation of being around people. Corrupted files. Corrupted drivers. We're all walking around out of tune. Well, I'm not. I'm in tune. That's why I call my business Stay Tuned Soul Therapy. So if you've listened this far, thank you so much. I know you're a magical being yourself, doing the thing. What are you doing? And how did you find me? I'm on TikTok, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. I'm on Instagram at Stay Tuned Soul Therapy. The Quantum Empath. I love that name. Spirit sent it to me. And when I went to TikTok and found out it was available, I was like, what? In 2026, there's nobody going by this name? Of course, God, I'll take it. And you want me to name a podcast that too? Okay. My business, my brick and mortar was already established, or, I'd make them all the same. And I might rebrand one day. But right now, I just am trying to help grassroots level work with the collective. I want to bring you with me when you're ready to know your true potential as a human being, not a human doing, but as a human being, a spiritual being here having a human experience. Congratulations. It's so fun. So yeah, that's the levels I've seen. I will continue talking about this process. If you have questions, I would love feedback. I would love to understand where my audience is at with their process. And that's the thing about doing a podcast is I don't really get the feedback from you guys. I just have to trust that it's going out to the people who need it. So thank you for being here. I know I operate on frequency, and if you've heard this far, you are part of my tribe. I love you, and we'll catch you on the next episode.